At this time, I will turn the program over to Will Herman, partner with Deloitte and Atlanta Area Council Board of Director, to get us kicked off. Will?
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for the second Scout Law virtual meeting in the series. The Atlanta Area Council launched this series a couple months ago, and for those of you who are not close to scouting, there are 12 principles that Scouts live by. A Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. The first virtual gathering focused on reverent and was titled, "We Are Reverent." And it was incredibly moving. And I bring that up because in case you missed it, it is available on the BSA website, atlantabsa.org, and look for the Scout Law series. And you'll see Rodney Bullard with the Chick-fil-A and the discussion with the entire panel. So great event, and we look forward to carrying on the tradition here. The purpose of today's meeting is to discuss the third point of Scout Law, helpful. We're going to discuss how we can be united through helping in the community and really the value of doing that in these very uncertain times. So today we'll discuss what helpful looks like for us as both individuals, as companies, and then how we can support our local community. Excited to introduce the panelists that we have today. I'll start. We have Kevin Greiner, the President and CEO of Gas South. Thank you for joining us. We have Eric Johnson, the Secretary and Treasurer of the Robert W. Woodruff Foundation. We have Darryl Ledger with Chick-fil-A, and he is also, similar to myself, an Atlanta Area Council Board of Director member. We have Dr. Grant Rivera, the Superintendent of Marietta City Schools. We have Tracy Tracy, the Scout Executive and CEO of the Atlanta Area Council. And then 3 Scouts. We have Ethan Brown, who is a Scout from Troop 525. We have Nathan EADS, who is an Eagle Scout from Troop 370 and currently a student at the University of Alabama. And then we have Zoe Embleton, who is a Scout from Troop 160. So thank you, the 3 of you and all of our panelists, for joining us today. I'd like to remind the viewers that there's a Q&A feature to submit ways that you've helped during this time or to offer any other uplifting comments that you might have. So with that, I'll turn the call over to Ethan to lead us in a short invocation. Ethan?
Lord, we thank you for this day. Help us to do our best every day and forgive us when we slip. Teach us to be kind to other people and to help them at all times. Bless our parents and teachers and leaders and all the members of Scouting. Bless us, Lord, in your love for us. Help us to be better Scouts and let us do our best for you. Amen.
So why don't we get started and talk about what it means to be helpful during a time of crisis such as this. So to help us, we'll have Ethan continue his part of the process and weigh in, Ethan, about how you and your troop have recently helped with military veterans and healthcare workers. Can you give us some perspectives on that?
A Scout is helpful, but what does this really mean? For Scouts, it means caring about other people. A Scout willingly volunteers to help others without expecting payment or reward. Scouts promise in the Scout Code to help other people at all times. Our troop recently helped with a project at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Decatur. COVID-19 has placed challenges on hospitals throughout the country, including the Atlanta VA where my dad works. Hospitals need to ensure safety for all employees and patients that enter the medical facility. In order to decrease the spread of COVID-19, employees and veterans were limited to one entry point with 2 separate lines to maintain social distancing and allow for screening questions and temperatures to be taken. The veterans line was covered and protected all the way into the building, but the employees had areas that were not covered. VA employees were exposed to the heat and rain while waiting to get screened. As a Cub Scout, I attended day camp, and I remember every year enjoying my time at these outside activities. Each activity location had 3 large pop-up tents that offered shelter from the sun and heat for the scouts and leaders. It was nice to have the pop-up tents there, and good to know that someone cared enough to provide us relief from the sun. I wondered if the day camp pop-up tents could be used to make a covered pathway for the employees of the Atlanta VA. And maybe the VA employees would have the same feeling I had as a Cub Scout at day camp. Someone cared enough to provide us relief from the sun and rain. I discussed this idea with my dad, the VA, the Atlanta Area Council, and the Button Gwinnett District leadership teams. We were able to take the idea and make it a reality. On Saturday, April 11th at 9 o'clock, we assembled a team of 10 scouts, 6 leaders, and 12 pop-up tents, and 40 bags of sand. We made a plan and headed to the Atlanta VA, set up a covered walkway for the employees. When we arrived, we worked as a team to set up tents in a line to form a pathway. We secured the tents together with rope and weighed the tents down with sand for social distance. For social distancing, we marked the ground with an X every 6 feet. The final project was a 96-foot covered walkway that was safe and secure from the heat and rain for the VA employees. The VA leadership team thanked us for the time we spent to set up the covered walkway and caring about the employees of the VA. I want to thank Dr. Cooper, Mr. Fisher, Mr. Bilal, Mr. and Mrs. Chapin with the Atlanta District and Troops 525, 419, and 420. This project could not have happened without them. To me, a scout that is helpful can be summed up as a scout that cares enough to do something for someone else. This brings added meaning to doing a good turn daily. I encourage everyone to take action to do something helpful for someone else today. This will lead to a better tomorrow and a brighter future. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for all that you're doing during this difficult time, and trying to find ways to help the community is certainly what scouting is all about. So thank you very much. So with that, Dr. Rivera, welcome, and thank you for joining us. Love to get your perspectives based on what you're doing in your leadership role at the Marietta City Schools.
Yeah, thank you, Will. I am so humbled and honored to join the Atlanta Area Council, Will, and you and all the other panelists. I'm kind of having a pinch me moment. Before I talk about being helpful, I guess I'll talk about myself as a young scout. So I was never of like Ethan's caliber or Zoe's caliber. I mean, I was just trying to get my little derby car to roll. I was trying to get a patch. I was trying to figure it out. So the fact that I can now somehow redeem myself, potentially 35 years later, this is a really special morning for me. So thank you for allowing me to be included. So I serve as a superintendent at Marietta City Schools, just north of Atlanta. We serve just under 9,000 children, 1,200 staff. And I think this value statement that the Scouts so appropriately highlight around being helpful has never been more true in our community. And I know across schools and communities now, the reality is that for our community and for the Metro Atlanta area, when schools closed on March 16th, there were a lot of people having conversations about how are we going to teach children. And the reality is, if we're really living this value that's part of the scouting, the scouting mantra, if we're really living these values as they're part of our community being helpful, the conversation doesn't just start with how do we educate kids when our schools are closed. And in Marietta, our vision to be helpful and our values around being helpful, yes, we were going to get to teaching and learning, but we actually had to start at a much more basic need. So, I mean, specifically, our first conversations were how are we going to feed children? And our second conversation was how are we going to get connectivity and laptops and hotspots in the hands of kids? And then how do we meet the social and emotional needs? And then how we educate them. And I think what's important and this life lesson that we have around being helpful is that, yes, in many of our roles, we have very traditional responsibilities. And then as an educator, it's around teaching and learning and building relationships with kids. But as schools closed, our hearts had to open to other ways that maybe we had never needed to be helpful before. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I have served a kid a cafeteria lunch, but that's very, very different than in the city of Marietta, where we have served over 170,000 meals across 81 different bus stops every single day. That's very different than us getting hotspots and Chromebooks and giving them to children and saying, you take this home, don't just keep it in a classroom that's now closed. So I think for us, it was about taking this value of being helpful and taking it beyond our traditional role, much like the video we saw or the pictures we saw a moment ago about setting up the tents. How do we go beyond the role that we thought we were called for and now live in a role being helpful that we're needed for? And I think maybe my last point I'll bring up, I think, and I put my hat on as an educator, the opportunity we have now to shape the value of being helpful for children will be lessons we can show them for a lifetime. I've got a first grader at home. She's 7 years old. I'm going to be honest with you. a year from now or 5 years from now, she's not going to remember the math lesson on geometric shapes. What she's going to remember is that we put meals together that we could deliver to families and children. She's not going to remember the phonics lesson. She's going to remember going out to a driveway of somebody we didn't know and writing, in this together with a heart. So my hope is that all of us in this moment can engage in things that go beyond learning in a classroom and really think about how can we instill experiences and values around being helpful to others, seeing needs in a way we've never seen them before. And I think these lessons, just like scouting, will carry with kids for a lifetime. There will be memories around being helpful that I think will change people's perspective forever.
Thank you. Thank you for your leadership during these times, and great point about what the kids are going to remember. So very inspirational. Thank you for that. And I'm sure that car, by the way, I'm sure it rolled just fine back however many years ago that was. So thanks again. And with that, I'd like to call upon Nathan, who I introduced earlier. Nathan is an Eagle Scout from Troop 370 in Buckhead, and he and his team they've done a lot. So Nathan, take us through what you guys have done.
Hi, as Will said, I'm Nathan EADS. I'm an Eagle Scout out of Troop 370 and a mechanical engineer at the University of Alabama. At school, I run the 3D printing lab, or help to run the 3D printing lab. And a few weeks ago, after classes were officially moved online for the remainder of the semester, I co-founded Atlanta Face Shields here with one of my best friends from high school. Initially, our goal was to produce 500 3D printed face shields to frontline Atlanta medical workers. And as our according to our most recent account, we believe we've produced somewhere around 2,400, and we're really far from being done. We've raised nearly $25,000 between friends and family and just supporters throughout the metro Atlanta area. And we've really been blown away by the community support. We've been seeing tons of names we haven't heard from in years. We're really happy to see them and hear from them. Not to mention all the names, possibly even more inspiring, that we've never heard of or heard from. And I think what we've done best, in my opinion, is completely by chance, which is the group of volunteers that have come to our aid. Between the 30 or 40 so people who have been helping us to 3D print these parts, to the people helping us make business decisions and balancing our checkbooks. We've met some truly amazing people, and in fact, surprisingly, or perhaps even unsurprisingly, we've seen a vast majority of Eagle Scouts throughout this time. And we're so thankful for their helpfulness within our organization and to the support that they're giving to the medical community in fighting this virus. And I think this selflessness and helpfulness that I see throughout our email chains and virtual get-togethers is really truly inspiring. And I think that if anybody in the audience feels the same way today, I think that they're very fortunate in a time like this, where there are a lot of things that you can do to help, whether it's something as simple as getting groceries for your grandparents, or even just staying safe at home. There's a lot of stuff to be done in these times. So on that note, stay safe, roll tide, and be prepared.
Thank you very much, and thanks for leading that very important effort. I know you mentioned a lot of volunteers, but having people like you put it together is obviously very, very important. So thank you for all that you do. So with that, let's hear from Kevin Greiner, the president and CEO of Gas South. Really appreciate you joining us and look forward to hearing your words.
Sure thing, and thanks everyone. It's a pleasure being with you all. A little bit about Gas South. So we're a natural gas provider. We serve over 300,000 customers, and those are comprised of folks living in apartments, in single family homes. We've got lots of different business customers. We serve governments. We serve nonprofit institutions. So it's really a school system. So it's a very big cross section. And at Gas South, we're a very purpose-driven company, and our purpose is to be a fuel for good. We talk about that in the context of caring for our customers and our employees, and elevating our industry and the communities we serve. So helpfulness kind of gets imbued in all of those areas, and being helpful in these times, I think is of paramount importance. It aligns well with our purpose. So for employees, one of those big constituencies for us, obviously, the foundational part of being helpful as a company these days is getting folks in a position to work from home. And thankfully, we did an all company dry run for working from home in early March, and discovered some issues. That's why you do a dry run, and that really was very helpful for us and for our employees once we were in a position where we had to go to a mandatory work from home posture starting on March 16th. To facilitate that, we felt that we needed to help our employees get set up at home. So one of the things we did is a $55 a month stipend to establish a broadband connection or increase their connection capacity at home. We also paid for and shipped off monitors to everyone who wanted them for their home offices. And I think a lot of companies, we're just one example of some of the things that we're doing here, but I think that this whole pandemic has really caused companies to figure out, how do I help my employees to balance work and life and be, productive as they can be, but also to thrive as people. And this pandemic, I think, has created challenges in that respect, but also, like Dr. Rivera said, I think we're all going to take away a lot of things that come out of this pandemic and say, there are some real silver linings in terms of re-looking at the world and how we, as companies, engage with our employees in much more productive and mutually beneficial ways. Another thing that we did is we've had an employee assistance fund that's paid for the company and administered by the United Way. And while we haven't had to lay off anyone or reduce hours, we've been very fortunate that way. Many of our employees have had family members who have lost their incomes. So having that type of fund available to them has been really important. And then lots of company communications, more than we've ever done, in the spirit of being helpful. So we're doing weekly recorded video addresses. I'm doing a fortnightly live town hall. We're doing student of the business sessions twice a week, where different leaders at our company are doing live and recorded broadcasts of an area that would be of interest to everyone in the company so they can learn more about Gas South. We're doing a lot of work, of course, via Microsoft Teams and Zoom, and that's really been exciting for us. For customers, we also amped up a lot of our communications. One of the things that I think has been helpful from an industry standpoint is that all involuntary disconnections of service have been suspended. That would go for gas, but also for electric utilities and for water and pretty much and cable and broadband. All those service providers have in essence given customers a much needed break on that. And but at the same time, we're working to ensure that our customers don't get too far behind in their bills so they can get caught up to the extent possible in the spring or summer. We also have a program called our Helping Hands program, and it forgives a portion of a customer's natural gas bill if they've experienced recent financial hardship. So we've already forgiven some over $200,000 in past due charges since the pandemic began, and that's many times what we normally forgive as part of that program. So, an extraordinary demand for that. In elevating our industry, we're trying to be helpful there too, playing a central role in the industry's discussions on how to manage the collections challenges and bad debt impact of the pandemic. And what's been brought about by the suspension of all these involuntary disconnections of service. That's a great thing for customers. Of course, for your industry participants, it creates the prospect of some significant financial hardship for the companies that are buying that gas, arranging for it to get to homes and businesses, and then potentially not getting paid for it. So, we need to make sure that our industry has its needs met in terms of the whole industry staying financially viable, especially some of the smaller guys who don't have the same capacity that we do to weather this storm. And then the most important, I think, is being helpful in terms of elevating our community. And Gas South announced over $1 million of community investment back in April. We put most of that money to work. It's focused on organizations that are providing emergency assistance. There were a few organizations that we really focused our support for. One was the United Way. And as part of that contribution to them, we're including a partnership with the Georgia Restaurant Association, where some of that money is being set aside for restaurant workers, an important customer segment of ours whose employees have just been, decimated by the pandemic, and had huge layoffs, of course. So having some help for those folks in particular, we felt was important. We gave a lot of money to the YMCA, which is doing some incredible work. Talk about being helpful in terms of converting YMCA facilities into childcare facilities for healthcare workers and emergency responders. It's a really great story of repurposing, facilities, but of course, the Y needs money to be able to run those programs, and we've been providing some of that assistance. And then the Atlanta Community Food Bank is another one that we've given a lot of money to. And that one includes a partnership with hotels that are converting their motor lobbies into food distribution centers for furloughed and laid off hotel workers. So there's some incredible innovation, I think, going on in helpfulness right now that I really find inspiring. And, we're doing all of this in alignment with the Gas South Way, and that's our 3 core values of putting people first, doing what's right, and striving to win. And then lastly, I've been really inspired by our employees and all the helpful things that they are doing in their day-to-day lives. They're serving customers, they're working with each other on important projects and initiatives. They're supporting each other through personal challenges stemming from working at home or the economic and health effects associated with the pandemic itself, and how our team at Gas South has just kind of stood up and said, hey, these are tough times, but we got to dig deep and continue to do our jobs while also having all of these other personal challenges laid on top of ourselves. People have done a tremendous job, and I'm just so inspired by these stories and how I think our country overall has really stepped up and said, it's time to dig a little deeper, give back more with generosity and grace, and try to support each other through this through these tough times. Thank you for letting me be here today.
Thank you very much, and appreciate those words. And I'm sure that your job that you're doing each day changed significantly overnight. So thanks for all of that. So with that, I'd like to again introduce Darryl Ledger with Chick-fil-A, and would love, Darryl, for you to share some perspectives on the ways that you and your team are being helpful during these times.
Well, thanks, Will. I appreciate the opportunity to serve, the opportunity to speak today. We're just this little chicken sandwich company based here in Atlanta. And our late founder, Truett Cathy, always says, what's one of the best ways to be helpful is to encourage people. So how do you know when they need encouragement? Basically, they're breathing. And we really embarked upon a journey this year of being what we call the most caring company, the best way that we know how to serve customers, serve our guests, and our employees. So when I was asked the question the other day, how are we being helpful? I actually had to pull some information together myself. I know what we've done as a department, but also just as a company. We're doing a lot with the Atlanta Food Bank, making sure that people are supported through food bank. We are a food company, restaurant company, so we can do that. We're helping a lot of people in that regard. We've also given our franchisees, our operators, a certain amount of money that they can spend in the community, the best way that they would see fit to serve team members, serve customers, just people in their communities. So we've allotted them money. We put together the logistics this past week for about 600 people to do COVID testing. So we provided food, but we also kind of coordinated all the logistics associated with COVID testing, not just for team members, but also for just people who needed that service in general. Again, we really feel like we want to be the most caring company, and this is not a marketing pitch for Chick-fil-A, but we really want to serve others. So if we can give away free food, if we can give away donations to support people. I've even heard of stories of franchisees helping other franchisees. We started out in the mall and migrated to freestanding restaurants. Well, we actually have some mall locations that are closed, and we've got team members and franchisees that are not basically making any money. And I heard a story earlier this week where some of our franchisees went and actually paid for team members and paid for a franchisee's salary for the month. Basically helped them pay their rent, their mortgage, So we're trying to do a lot of things, I guess, from the ground up within our company, but also, again, to serve customers and guests. So I'd be glad to share more, but I did want to just let you guys know that we do want to care for people. We do want to share. I know I've done some things personally myself. I won't highlight those, but I've just seen a lot of needs given this pandemic. And just to encourage everybody, we will get through this. You know, there's been a lot of sickness. There's been a lot of loss of life. But we firmly believe, and I firmly believe, that we will get through this. We will encourage each other. We'll be stronger as a nation. Our business community will even be stronger. Our people will be stronger. And let's just remember, I think for helpfulness, for me, it means just encourage people. I'm actually sitting on the porch, and I've had a chance to just see neighbors and people walk up and down the street. If I can do nothing more than just smile and say hello, just to encourage them, that's been a lot for me. But again, best to everyone. I've enjoyed hearing what I've heard from my colleagues. And thanks to the Boy Scouts for, you know, the Atlanta Area Council for what you're doing. There's a lot going on. Too much to highlight. You don't want to be hubris in what you say, because we're all trying to do really great things. But let's just continue, again, just to be helpful. Let's encourage, speak to that person. Even though you have your mask on, you know, if you can just throw your hand up in the grocery store, that helps people. So God bless you all.
Thank you, Darryl. Appreciate those perspectives, and glad you were able to sit out on the porch. I think the weather is certainly a great thing this time during these times to be able to enjoy it. Eric, welcome. So Eric, you're obviously with Woodruff Foundation, and thanks for all that you do and that your company does. So I thought I'd ask you to share a little bit about both your scouting background as well as the work that Woodruff is doing in the community.
Sure thing. Thanks, Will. And let me first reiterate Darryl's thanks to all the members of the Atlanta Area Council. As Will mentioned, I have the privilege of working with the Robert W. Woodruff Foundation and also the Joseph B. Whitehead Foundation, both of which are strong, longtime supporters of scouting. And as Will referenced, I think you can probably say that my own character was shaped in many ways by my scouting experience as a member and Eagle Scout from Troop 110 in Brandon, Florida. And Nathan, you may be able to identify with this. No matter what I accomplish for the rest of my days, being an Eagle Scout will be my top achievement to my mom. When I was growing up, I think the image of scouting that was most prevalent maybe in the minds of people who may be unfamiliar with scouting was the image of a boy in uniform helping an old lady cross the street. What you may not know is that image actually has a basis in fact and history. In Lord Baden-Powell's first Scout handbook, Scouting for Boys, he talked about something that Ethan referenced earlier, which is the concept of doing a good turn daily. And among those small, simple acts of kindness, those acts of helpfulness, he talked about helping an old lady cross the street. And so from the very beginning, more than 100 years ago, the concept of helpfulness was fundamental to scouting. But a question that we've been asking a lot lately is, how can you be most helpful during a time of crisis, like the time we're in right now? When even basic acts of kindness, like helping an old lady cross the street, are either impossible, at the very least, ill-advised. You know, Baden-Powell talked about doing a good turn daily, but the scouting movement also, I think, contemplates and has a lot of enthusiasm for helping at a bigger scale, a larger scale. Things and acts of kindness that require strategy and planning, like an Eagle Scout project or a troop service project. And so I want to share with you a couple of examples of some of those larger acts of kindness and helpfulness that we've seen around our community over the last couple of months. And Kevin and Darryl mentioned a couple of them, but one they didn't mention is a group that came up with a concept called Feeding the Front Line. And that's a name for a program where a small group of donors very quickly came together and thought, man, we need to do something to help not just frontline healthcare workers, but also, like Kevin referenced earlier, we need to do something to help food service workers who are going to be affected by COVID-19, who may lose their jobs. And so at this point, almost 1,500 foundations, companies, and individual donors have come together in our community and over the last several weeks have helped organize an effort to serve more than 50,000 meals to frontline health workers and first responders and help keep people in the restaurant and catering industry working. The Atlanta Community Food Bank, they faced food scarcity and rising demand with ingenuity. They knew that food insecurity would become a big issue as unemployment rose or continues to rise. And they also, because it's their business, realized that runs on grocery stores would create more scarcity. And so they very quickly retooled their sourcing operation to begin sourcing food from different untraditional providers. And the community responded to that need. Since mid-March, more than 23,000 people have made donations to the food bank, dollar donations, cash donations. And most importantly, of the 23,000 donors they've had since this crisis started in Atlanta and in Georgia, more than 11,000 of them are first-time donors to the food bank. So that's an example of one of those small acts of kindness that even Lord Baden-Powell talked about in Scouting for Boys when he used among his examples of how to do a good turn. In 1908 terms, he talked about putting a half penny in the box for those most in need. And we're seeing examples of that all around Atlanta. Kevin mentioned this one earlier, the YMCA of Metro Atlanta. They had to shut down all their facilities, but they knew that there was a tremendous need for childcare for frontline healthcare workers and first responders. They knew they could do it. They knew it was the right thing to do. And so although they shut down their facilities, they opened their childcare centers to the kids of those frontline workers. And they also knew that they could take that risk because they were fairly certain that the Atlanta community would come together to support their effort, and it did. Similarly, several homeless service providers, Mercy Care, Hope Atlanta, and others have stepped up in a united way to help the city of Atlanta to make sure that the neediest in our community can get tested for COVID-19. And then Kevin mentioned this in the context of food insecurity earlier. 3 hotel owners in downtown Atlanta stepped up to commit their empty buildings to ensure that the homeless would have a healthy place to spend the night, have a healthy place to stay until this challenge passes. You know, these are challenges for sure, but there are innumerable examples in our community of people stepping up through helpful acts of kindness, large and small. The ones I just named have in common thoughtful, prepared leaders who, in the face of this crisis, didn't just think what they could do, but thought about what they can do to be the most helpful to the largest number of people in Atlanta. So Nathan earlier inspired us all to think about how we can use our talents to help in this crisis. For some of you, maybe like Nathan, maybe like the folks who started Feed the Front Lines, those might be, or that might be thinking really big and marshaling others to lend a hand on a really large scale with a strategic act of kindness, a strategic act of helpfulness like Atlanta Face Shields. But what about Baden-Powell's notion of doing a good turn through small acts of kindness? What about how can we do small acts of kindness through social distancing? I'd suggest that one of the most helpful things you can do for that old lady who needs to cross the street is to wear a face mask. I'd suggest that putting a half penny in the box for those most in need is something that a lot of us can do. Or just simply offering a smile and a thank you to the next first responder or healthcare worker or grocery store clerk that you see, like Darryl suggested. Whatever your instincts, I think we'd all benefit from looking around our community right now and picking out those acts of helpfulness. And then our entire community would benefit from each of us going that extra step and thinking about what it is that we can do, whether it's large or small or whatever. And so I want to thank you for the opportunity today. I want to thank all the scouts and the parents of scouts who may be tuning in for everything you're doing for our community. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Will. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric, and thanks for all you do and for that overview of some of the things that are happening in our community. I've been hearing a lot about companies and not-for-profits coming together, so it's just great to hear it in action. So with that, Zoe Embleton, I'd like to welcome you and hear a little bit about what you and your troop are doing in the community.
Hi, I'm Zoe, and I'm a troop guide and scout with Troop 160 of St. Martin's Church. I'd like to share how our troop has shown helpfulness. Our troop's charter organization representative is Dr. Lori Hart. When the quarantine first started, Dr. Hart saw an immediate need with another local church community called Fountain Temple Church, where she estimated that many of the parishioners were going to have difficulty acquiring food for their family, either due to the risk of exposure to the virus or that many of the families were falling on difficult financial times. Dr. Hart and her family came up with the idea to reach out to some friends to acquire some food that can be bagged together to pass on to these families in need. Dr. Hart's son Braden is also a scout with our boys troop, Troop 379. It was a no-brainer for her to reach out to both boys and the girls troop to make this a service project. What is great about the project during this quarantine situation is that everyone involved can come by at different times and continue to exercise social distancing. Several members of the troop came by Dr. Hart's house with our parents to drop off goods during the first week of operation. With so much having already been dropped off, members of our troop were able to separate the items into different categories, such as pasta, canned vegetables, soups, and other starches. With the items separated, each scout would take a bag and basically go shopping by placing a desirable combination of food into each bag. The first week, we made about 43 bags for different families at both Fountain Temple Church and Emma's house. The initial grassroots efforts that started with Dr. Hart's friends and 2 scout troops expanded beyond our troops to include many others from the community. This has also included a grant of $2,000 to keep the program going, given by the St. Martin's Church Endowment Committee. Through the month of April, the Bags of Hope program delivered over 237 bags of groceries to families in need and has continued beyond this past week. It has been an honor for our troop to participate in this wonderful project.
Thank you very much, and thanks for all you're doing. I love seeing those pictures and showing the activities in action, I'll call it. So thanks again for that, Zoe. And with that, I'd like to introduce Tracy. Tracy, welcome, and thanks for everything you do and for you and your organization leading this call today. And as everybody knows, Tracy is the Scout Executive and CEO here in Atlanta. So welcome, and love to hear your remarks.
Thanks, Will, and thanks for your leadership on our board throughout all of the year. We really appreciate all that you're doing. So I'm going to begin my comments with just an invitation for everyone. If you want to be helpful, jump in on the Atlanta Area Council Food Drive in partnership with the Atlanta Community Food Bank. We kicked this off a couple of weeks ago, and it is a food drive where you can go on our website. You can download the list of the most needed and appropriate items that the food bank suggested that we ask our scouts to collect. And the scouts will essentially really collect it from their home and their neighbors, their friends. We're not necessarily canvassing the entire community because of the obviousness of restrictions, but we have already collected well over 1,000 meals, and our goal is to get 10,000. So please go on our website, check into that, and be a part of the helpful solution the Boy Scouts of America are presenting to Atlanta at this time. The next shout out I want to give is something that we all know that families are affected disproportionately on this pandemic. And a lot of the children that we serve through our Scout Reach program are from low-income communities at all compass points in Atlanta. And those children sometimes will have additional challenges that our own families may or may not have. So we put together some scouting care packages for a number of those families. And we're grateful for Publix for donating some pretty significant gift cards for the public stores. And we put in some Scout shirts and Scout fun things, and took those scouting care packages to a number of doorsteps for our Cub Scouts and Scouts BSA youth throughout Atlanta. And we intend to do a lot more of that as time goes on. But as I look at the faces of the panelists today, I see the rock solid reputations of many of the leading citizens of Atlanta. And we're grateful to have friends like this backing the Atlanta Area Council and the Boy Scouts of America. And as CEO and just scrolling through the list of all of our participants, wow, we have so many wonderful volunteers, financial supporters that are believing in the mission of scouting and helping us to continue through this incredible work. And it brings me back to first concept of friends and what they mean. And it was a conversation with my mother many, many decades ago. And she said, choose your friends wisely because they will define you and they will define your reputation. And it's so true. And since then, I've learned that our friends also contribute significantly to who we are and how we think and how we act and what becomes our character. So I'm so grateful for everyone that's on this panel and everyone that's on this call for being a friend of the Atlanta Area Council. You're helping to shape us, and we're grateful for that. Scouting has an interesting way of attracting people to recruit children. We make these great projections and fulfill them so they get to go to camp and they get to go to hikes. We teach them how to use bows and arrows and shoot BB guns and cook hot dogs and hamburgers and sit around a campfire and all the fun things. Yet what we tell the parents is similar, but something more. We tell the parents, we're going to help your child develop their character. We're going to help them develop the values of the Scout Oath and Scout Law. And we don't necessarily tell the Scouts that because they just want to have fun. But through the program of the Boy Scouts of America, we're developing them and their skill sets to be trustworthy and loyal and helpful and friendly and courteous and kind, and to help other people at all times. What's really fascinating is then watching the Scouts when they join from being a small child, 6 or 7 years old. By the time they're 10 or 12, or certainly by the time they're 14, they start to get it. They start to understand that their character has been influenced and they like it. And they can articulate well beyond their young years of how scouting is helping to shape their values, in particular, how to be helpful at all times. And if we can put a photo up, I want to talk about an excerpt from a scout, Bilal Murad of Troop 12, chartered to a mosque up in Alpharetta. And this is a great troop, and Bilal is one of the scouts in that picture. And he spoke last week at our Duty to God event. And I was just mesmerized with the maturity and the ability to carry a message from this man. It's a great troop, wonderful adult leaders involved, and he spoke at the Duty to God about his faith in Islam and what scouting means. There's an actual scout photo of Bilal, if we've got that. And he's a teenager, and he talked about how he wants to help other people at all times, and things as special as saving lives is something he would like to do if he gets a chance, and just to be charitable and to help out through his own charitable giving. And I don't know how old he is. Let's say he's 14, right? And I thought to myself, what if every 14-year-old in Atlanta wanted to help wanted to help other people at all times, like this 14-year-old or however old he is. But man, that'd make Atlanta a pretty cool place if every 14-year-old raised his hand and gave the scout sign and said, I promise to be helpful to other people at all times, once a week. And he said that in front of that oath, in front of his friends. And he said that for year after year after year. That's who he is becoming. And we're so proud of him. So that's what happens at scouting. That's how scouting shapes lives of children, not just Bilal, but the tens of thousands of scouts that we're shaping. So let's go fast forward. So let's say that these 14-year-olds, it's 10 years later, and they're in their mid-20s. They graduated from college, or they're into their trade, and they're looking for jobs. They're looking for employers, right? They're looking for neighborhoods to live in. They're looking for significant others and spouses. Isn't that the kind of young people that we want to come to our place of employment and work with us? Isn't that the kind of young person help our neighborhood and potentially join our family? That's the kind of people that I want Atlanta to be built on, and our country, United States, to be built on. People that are helpful at all times. People that have been schooled in it, that have said the oath, that have said the scout law time after time and time again, and it becomes who they are. And they're reinforced by their friends. They're shaped by their friends who take the same oath and same law in that ingraining that builds their character. It's who they are. They can't help it. It's who they are. It's their nature. That's the world we live in the Boy Scouts of America. That's who we are. We are helpful to other people at all times. And you are an incredible part of that. Whether you're a volunteer, whether you're a financial supporter, whether you're someone that's just tuning in because you're friends with one of the panelists, you're a part of our family. You're a part of this mission, this movement to help other people at all times and to make that our way. So thank you. I'll close off by saying we have good friends in the Boy Scouts of America. You are a part of that. Thank you for being a part of our service to the tens of thousands of children and families in Metro Atlanta. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Tracy. And for me personally, it's been great hearing these stories and thinking about the concept of helpfulness during these difficult times. So with that, I'd like to thank all the panelists, thank everyone who's joining us today. If you enjoyed the presentation and you're interested in supporting our scouting programs, please visit the website, atlantabsa.org, to either donate or become a volunteer. Please join us for the next gathering, We Are Brave, on Thursday, May 28th at noon. You see here on the screen. And again, another one of the 12 principles, Brave. Look forward to hearing about that. And with that, please, everyone, stay safe, healthy, and we look forward to connecting with everyone soon. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.